The earth trembled as the armored column advanced. Hundreds of tanks rolled across the plain, their engines growling, steel tracks grinding through the soil. Dust clouds billowed in their wake, the sound of heavy armor echoing for miles. Crews inside the turrets felt untouchable, confident in machines built to withstand any weapon. The sight of so many tanks moving together carried a kind of primal power, unstoppable, immovable, a wall of steel stretching across the horizon. But then the sound changed. At first, it was a faint buzzing, like insects gathering somewhere far away. Moments later, the horizon darkened, with specks rising from the hills. The noise grew into a roar, hundreds of small engines beating the air at once. A swarm of drones surged forward, a storm of metal and propellers, moving too fast, too many to count. The battlefield was about to transform from the old world into the new. The tanks fired upward, their machine guns tracing lines across the sky. Explosions dotted the air as some drones fell burning. But the swarm kept coming, small, cheap, relentless. They dove onto turrets, slammed into engine decks, pierced the weak points that even the thickest armor couldn't protect. Fireballs erupted as one tank after another was torn open, black smoke curling into the morning air. Crews scrambled from hatches, some cut down before they hit the ground. The armored spearhead of a 20th century army was dissolving under the assault of 21st century machines. For the first time, a weapon once feared above all others, the tank, was being tested against a new predator. The swarm didn't tire, didn't hesitate, didn't fear. And in that clash, the future of warfare was being written in fire and steel. Before we go deeper, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed, because the battle between drones and tanks is not science fiction. It's happening right now, and its outcome could decide the wars of tomorrow. For more than a century, the tank has been the undisputed monarch of land warfare. Its story began in the mud and horror of the First World War, when soldiers trapped in trenches dreamed of a machine that could cross no man's land, crush barbed wire, and silence machine guns. The first British Mark I tanks were clumsy, slow, and terrifying, rolling across the battlefield like armored beasts. They broke the stalemate of static war and introduced a new idea: that steel, mobility, and firepower could shatter armies that once seemed immovable. By the time the Second World War erupted, the tank had transformed from experiment to empire. German blitzkrieg, lightning war, was built on armored divisions slicing through defenses, racing deep into enemy territory before infantry could react. Soviet T-34s and American Shermans rolled in their thousands across Europe, their thunder deciding the fate of cities, nations, and continents. Wherever they appeared, tanks carried the weight of victory or defeat. In the Cold War, they grew larger, stronger, more lethal. NATO's Leopard 2s and M1 Abrams stood ready against Soviet T-72s across the plains of Europe, their cannons capable of destroying each other from miles away. Generals called them land battleships, mobile fortresses able to absorb punishment that no infantry could survive. For decades, the world measured power in divisions of tanks. Even in the 21st century, the myth endured. In Iraq, Abrams tanks led the charge into Baghdad, shrugging off rocket fire and rolling through city streets like unstoppable giants. In Syria, Russian T-90s clawed their way across shattered towns, their armor scarred but unbroken. In Ukraine, Leopards and Abrams were deployed again, symbols of Western commitment, heirs of a century of armored warfare. The tank's strength lies not only in its cannon and armor, but in the effect it has on those who face it. To an infantry soldier, the sight of a tank cresting the horizon is overwhelming. The sound of tracks pounding the earth, the sheer mass of steel advancing, the knowledge that nothing you carry can stop it. Tanks don't just fight, they dominate. But even as they rolled forward, cracks began to appear. Precision missiles made from shoulder-fired tubes could kill machines that cost millions. Guerrilla fighters, with nothing but an RPG, could turn a tank into a burning wreck. Yet despite these threats, armies still believed in the tank. They upgraded armor, added active protection systems, integrated digital targeting, and night vision. The tank was not dead. It was evolving. For a century, the tank was king. But kings, no matter how powerful, always face challengers. And on the modern battlefield, that challenge came not from another tank, but from swarms of machines small enough to fit in a backpack, yet deadly enough to pierce the strongest steel. The first drones on the battlefield were humble. Small, unarmed, their only task was to see what soldiers could not. They circled above trenches, recorded troop movements, spotted artillery targets. Cheap eyes in the sky, they changed the way commanders viewed war. No longer blind, no longer guessing. But soon, drones began to kill. At first, they carried small charges, barely enough to take out a single fighter hiding in the open. Then came armed drones, sleek machines like the American Predator and Reaper, circling high above Afghanistan and Iraq. They loitered for hours, watching, waiting, then unleashing hellfire missiles with surgical precision. To enemies without air defenses, they were unstoppable. The silent executioners of the modern battlefield. The leap from hunter-killers to swarms came quickly. Engineers realized that hundreds of tiny, cheap drones, networked together, could overwhelm defenses in ways a single expensive aircraft never could. They did not need heavy warheads. They only needed to hit the weak points, the engine deck of a tank, the exposed hatches, the logistics trucks trailing behind. Each drone was disposable, but together they became a weapon of mass disruption. The world saw their power in Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenian tanks, dug into ridgelines, were destroyed by Azerbaijani drones one after another, their turrets blasted skyward in violent fireballs. Armor that had been considered invincible melted away under relentless strikes from the sky. In Ukraine, the lesson was repeated. Cheap FPV drones, no bigger than a child's toy, slammed into Russian tanks, destroying machines worth millions for the cost of a few $100s. Columns of armored vehicles burned on highways, their wreckage a grim testament to the new age of war. The psychology of swarms is as deadly as their explosives. To the crews inside a tank, the buzzing grows louder, closer, until the air above them is filled with shadows. They fire machine guns upward, knowing they can never shoot them all down. They watch helplessly as drones dive straight toward their hatches, their vision filled with the last image their cameras transmit before impact. Against a swarm, no amount of courage can guarantee survival. And unlike tanks, swarms don't tire. They don't run out of adrenaline. They are launched again and again, as long as batteries can be charged and operators can pilot them from miles away. Every soldier killed, every vehicle destroyed, becomes proof that the age of steel is being replaced by the age of silicon and rotors. What do you think? Are tanks obsolete now, doomed by swarms of cheap machines? Or can they still adapt and survive on the battlefields of the future? The armored column advanced with confidence, steel beasts arrayed in perfect formation. 200 tanks rolled across the plain, their cannons elevated, their machine guns sweeping the skies for targets. Behind them, armored infantry carriers followed, dust plumes rising in the morning sun. To any observer, it looked unstoppable, the same kind of armored fist that had once crushed cities and shattered armies. But the drones were waiting. Launched in waves from hidden trucks and underground bunkers, hundreds of them filled the sky like a storm cloud. Some were the size of birds, carrying explosives no larger than a grenade. Others were heavier, able to carry shaped charges designed to pierce even modern tank armor. They rose in silence, guided by satellites and handheld controllers, their small motors blending into the background hum of the battlefield. The first wave struck fast. Dozens of drones dove straight at the lead tanks. Gunners opened fire, tracers stitching the sky, explosions rocking the swarm as some drones went down in fireballs. But enough slipped through. One drone dove into the engine deck of a tank, detonating in a blinding flash. Another slammed into the optics of a second tank, blinding its crew. Within minutes, the lead elements were burning, their turrets blown clear, black smoke curling upward. Commanders barked orders. The tanks tightened formation, overlapping their anti-air fire, trying to create a steel shield against the storm. Active protection systems engaged, small charges detonating around vehicles as they intercepted incoming drones. For a moment, the defenses held. Drones fell in dozens, shattered by fire and jammers. But then the second wave arrived. These drones were faster, more coordinated, darting low across the ground before rising suddenly to strike vulnerable spots. A swarm dived onto an infantry carrier, tearing it apart in seconds. Another group targeted the supply trucks, igniting fuel and ammunition, sending secondary explosions ripping through the rear of the column. The tanks pressed forward, but with every kilometer, their support crumbled behind them. Above, larger drones circled like hawks, dropping loitering munitions with deadly precision. Every time a tank stopped to regroup, a new fireball erupted, forcing it to move again. The swarm never allowed the column to rest, never gave commanders a chance to breathe. Desperation set in. Some crews abandoned their machines, fleeing on foot into the fields. Others stayed inside, firing wildly, trying to outlast the endless waves. For every drone that fell, two more seemed to appear. It was not a duel of equal weapons. It was attrition, a storm of cheap machines grinding down billion-dollar armor. By the end of the simulated engagement, the battlefield was littered with steel corpses. Turrets blown off, hulls charred, tracks twisted into knots of molten metal. Of 200 tanks, fewer than 50 remained operational. The rest had been destroyed or disabled. The drone swarm had won, not through superior firepower, but through sheer numbers, speed, and the relentless exploitation of weak points armor could never fully protect. The lesson was undeniable. Massed armor could still strike fear, but in a world of cheap, intelligent drones, the tank was no longer invincible. The battlefield littered with wrecked tanks was not the end of the story. For militaries watching closely, it was the beginning of a new race, not to abandon armor, but to reinvent it. Tanks had ruled the battlefield for a century, and no commander was willing to give up that crown without a fight. The first answer was technology. Engineers began fitting tanks with active protection systems, miniature radars, and explosive launchers designed to intercept incoming threats before they struck. Israel's Merkava tanks bristled with the trophy system, shooting down missiles and drones in midair with blinding flashes. Russia pushed forward with Arena and Afghanit, promising shields of steel and smoke that would protect even the heaviest T-14 Armata. Western tanks, too, received upgrades, new layers of sensors and jammers, designed not to withstand a hit, but to stop it from ever landing. Then came the search for new weapons. Lasers, once the stuff of science fiction, were mounted on vehicles to burn drones out of the sky at the speed of light. High-powered microwave emitters blasted swarms with waves of invisible energy, frying circuits and sending them crashing to Earth. The race was no longer about who had the thickest armor, but who could see first, react faster, and disable the enemy before the first strike landed. But adaptation wasn't only technical. Doctrine shifted too. No longer could tanks advance alone across open plains. They needed integrated protection. Infantry with anti-drone rifles, electronic warfare units scrambling enemy signals, and their own drones flying overhead like guardians. A tank without a drone escort was as vulnerable as a knight without a shield. Some armies experimented with tanks launching their own swarms. Small quadcopters carried on racks, released into the sky to scout ahead, jam hostile signals, or even dive against enemy drones before they reached their target. The tank was no longer just a machine of steel and firepower. It was becoming a mobile hub, commanding its own micro-army of autonomous systems. And yet, doubts lingered. Could these adaptations truly restore the balance, or were they just delaying the inevitable? The cost of one modern tank, with all its armor and electronics, could buy hundreds, even thousands of drones. For poorer nations, the math was obvious. Why build 10 tanks when you could unleash 10,000 flying machines that could cripple an armored division in hours? Generals debated fiercely. Some insisted that tanks still had a role, that only heavy armor could seize and hold ground. Others warned that in the next war, sending tanks into battle without overwhelming air control would be nothing short of suicide. And here's the dilemma for the future. Is the tank evolving into something stronger, or is it slowly being written out of history by cheaper, faster, disposable machines? What do you think? The answer was unclear, but one truth was undeniable. The battlefield had changed forever. The clash between steel and swarm had proven that no weapon, no matter how dominant, could remain king forever. The battlefield was silent at last. The dust had settled, the smoke had thinned, and the ground was littered with the wreckage of 2 centuries of warfare. Burned-out tanks sat frozen in the mud, their turrets blown clear, their armor pitted with scars. Around them lay the shattered bodies of drones, twisted rotors and scorched circuit boards, scattered like mechanical insects. The silence was deceptive. Both weapons had struck. Both had left their mark. The tanks had shown their strength, the ability to move, to hold, to strike with overwhelming firepower. The drones had shown their speed, their numbers, their merciless precision. Neither side had emerged unscathed, but the battlefield itself told the truth. The old world of steel was colliding with the new world of swarms, and the future belonged to whoever adapted fastest. Soldiers who once trusted in armor now glanced nervously at the sky. Commanders who once planned around armored spearheads now sketched their strategies around the invisible threat of buzzing machines. And engineers in hidden labs worked through the night, racing to find the answer, the shield, the countermeasure, the next evolution. The age of the tank is not over, but it is no longer uncontested. For the first time in a century, its throne is under siege. And the question that lingers is simple, but terrifying. In the wars to come, will the battlefield belong to the giants of steel, or to the swarms that hunt them? The horizon glows with smoke. The future waits in silence, and the swarm is already on its way.